This is the City of God podcast, where Christ meets culture. Welcome to the City of God podcast, where we are weekly talking about today's biggest cultural issues, all through the lens of God's infallible word. I'm Rob Pacienza, and I am joined by Dr. Jerry Newcombe, who is the executive director of the Providence Forum, which is one of the ministries of Coral Ridge Ministries, founded by D. James Kennedy. Jerry, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, Rob. My honor.
Let's dive right in. Tell our audience a little bit about this ministry, a ministry that is part of the overall ministry family of CRM, Coral Ridge Ministries, the ministry that you lead as executive director, Providence Forum. What is it, and what is its ultimate goal?
Well, Providence Forum was founded by Dr. Peter Loback, who basically was concerned about helping Americans, just like Dr. Kennedy was, to learn about our incredible Judeo-Christian roots. I mean, so many of the ideas that are encapsulated in America that help make it what it is, so unique, get back to the Bible. And so he and I teamed together in 2004, and we produced a book called George Washington's Sacred Fire. And this ended up becoming a bestseller by God's grace. But the gist of the book is that George Washington was a devout 18th century Anglican. He was a devout Christian. And to say otherwise is to bear false witness, quite frankly. It is
Sure.
a big 1,400 page or 1,200 page book, you know. So anyway.
That became one of the main pieces of the Providence Forum ministry.
Exactly. In fact, if you look at the publisher who published it, Providence Forum.
Yep.
Well, Dr. Loback, fast forward, became the president of Westminster Theological Seminary, and he became so busy with that, but he didn't want Providence Forum to kind of go by the wayside or become moribund. So he decided to donate it to Coral Ridge Ministries, and the ministry said, well, the logical person to help head this up is me, by God's grace. So I'm just so grateful. I'm like a kid in the candy shop because I love American history, and it's just so fascinating when you peel away the layers about American history. You see the Christian faith is all over the place.
Well, what gets me excited about the Providence Forum ministry, and that being part of the family of the overall ministry, CRM, is talk about how timely this ministry is in an age where history is being rewritten.
That's right.
Or even erased, statues being removed.
Yeah.
1619 project being introduced into the public education system. If Providence Forum was needed several decades ago, it's certainly needed it today in the year 2024. And so excited about the future of the Providence Forum and what you're doing. And one of the projects, one of the most recent projects of the Providence Forum is this project holding in my hand, The Beginning of Wisdom, What Made America a Center of Educational Excellence. Tell our audience a little bit more about this movie.
Sure. Well, this is part of a 7-part series of films that I've been making for the last few years.
Yep. You serve as the producer, produced by Providence Forum.
Exactly. And the whole point of it is that it's our Judeo-Christian legacy and so forth that has made America what it is. America is built on ideas, and those ideas come from the Bible ultimately. And the essence of the American experiment is self-rule under God. And the documentary opens up with the point that at one time America was one of the most well-educated countries in the whole world, and Mr. Madison, James Madison, the key architect really of the Constitution, said a well-instructed people alone can be a free people. So if we're not well-educated, we can't remain free, said the father or grandfather of our Constitution. I mean, this is a really important point. And in fact, we end the documentary using the voice of Mike Huckabee, who did the voice for Thomas Jefferson in the whole series of films that we did. And the Jefferson quote is along the lines, it's a very similar type quote. It's basically saying, as long as the people are well-educated and can read for themselves and keep up, and there's a free press, we can remain free. And of course, all these things are at risk. Self-rule under God is the essence of the American experiment, self-rule under God. Those two things, it all began really in the Mayflower cabin when the Pilgrims made a covenant together using the biblical concept of covenant. This ultimately gave rise to the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence 11 years before it. But the left, frankly, doesn't like either of those two key phrases. Self-rule, they want to be in charge. Under God, oh, forbidden. You know, the idea of, God being erased from the public square is anathema to America as founded.
Amazing.
In fact, the founding fathers gave us freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. Freedom from religion restricts the religious, practices of those who believe. Freedom of religion allows even the atheist to be free and, have his opinions. We don't agree with those opinions, but he's free to have those.
Jerry, in this feature, Beginning of Wisdom, produced by you and the Providence Forum, as you're exploring the Judeo-Christian roots of education in America, what are the things that you are pointing to in this feature to prove the thesis, to prove against the secular narrative of today that we have a secular roots as a nation and that even education had secular roots? What are you trying to prove in this feature that really helps to get the record straight?
All right. The working title of the film was The Bible and Education.
Okay.
And then I changed it to The Beginning of Wisdom. And of course, that's the second part of a verse, right, which says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Education for the masses was basically a Christian invention. I mean, the Pilgrims and the Puritans basically felt in order for people to be able to read the Bible for themselves, they have to be able to read and write and so forth. And so that's why
this even goes back to the Western Protestant Reformation.
Absolutely.
Our reformational roots point to and lead to universal education. Sorry
exactly.
to interrupt.
No. In fact, the first law in America related to education was called the Old Deluder Satan Act. Actually, it was nicknamed that.
1647?
Yes, in Boston. And the idea of it was it being one of the chief ends of that old deluder, Satan, to keep people from the Word of God. We got to make sure people can read and write so they can read the scriptures for themselves. And so for the first 200, really almost 300 years of American education, the Bible was the chief textbook in one way or another. The children, for example, in New England, even learned their ABCs on biblical truths like this. A, in Adam's fall, we sinned all. B, thy life to mend, the Bible tend. C, Christ crucified, for sinners died. Now, when I learned my ABCs in the 60s, I learned, C spot run, run spot run. But the Puritans and the Pilgrims, they learned this, these great biblical truths. In the New England Primer, which sold tens of millions of copies, or published, was printed tens of millions of copies, they actually have the Westminster Confession of Faith, the shorter catechism, the one for children. These are really strong, profound theological truths. And then that's education at the lower level. And then when you look at the higher education, or, in other words, colleges and universities, all the first colleges and universities in America were founded for Christian purposes by Christians. And usually it was just to train the ministers. I mean, we're talking about Harvard and William and Mary and Yale. Those are the first three universities in America. Princeton, founded by Presbyterian elders. All of these were founded to train Christian ministers. In the case of William and Mary, it was in the Anglican tradition. And in fact, the first and the only Ivy League school that was not founded explicitly for Christian reasons was Cornell University, founded in the 1840s. And yet that's more than 200 years after Harvard, named after the Reverend John Harvard, was founded. Truth for Christ and the Church, in Latin, it was their motto, Veritas, Christo et Ecclesiae. And then in the early part of the 1900s, they cut off the second part, so you end up with just Veritas, with truth firmly planted with both feet in midair, as one person.
It's amazing. Every time I visit Harvard and I walk under those arches and I look up and you read the words Veritas, you just can't help to think how far we've come from what our founders thought was true based in God's objective word and his absolute truth, and now how our modern culture is defining truth.
Yeah, in fact, at one point in the documentary, in the section about Harvard, we show the words Veritas, and then you see the Christo et Ecclesiae, and then we just kind of took out the other two. So you end up with just Veritas, but without the other part. And so, by the way, commenting in the documentary include Dr. Peter Loback and Dennis Prager,
Eric Metaxas,
Bill Federer, Alveda King is in there, and
we have some of the greatest thought leaders alive today in the church that are speaking into this issue of America's roots, our educational roots, being firmly grounded in the Judeo-Christian worldview. Let's talk a little bit about Princeton. I mean, Princeton as a institution for higher education, you just mentioned, was founded by the Presbyterians. Talk a little bit about the influence of John Witherspoon. Who John Witherspoon was as an educator, theologian, but also as a political figure in this nation.
Reverend John Witherspoon is credited as being the only directly active minister who signed the Declaration of Independence. So he's one of our key founding fathers. He's probably best known
as a Presbyterian.
He was a Presbyterian minister from Scotland. He was actually recruited to come and head up Princeton. And by the way, the first president of Princeton said, "Cursed is all learning that is contrary to the cross of Jesus Christ."
Amazing.
Think about that. And so anyway, Princeton, what Witherspoon did was he trained so many of the key founding fathers in a biblical worldview. And one of those was James Madison, who actually, when he went to Princeton, he actually stayed on a year later after he graduated to be directly mentored under Witherspoon. He was translating the Hebrew Bible into English, and Madison, as I say, was a key architect of the Constitution. And the Constitution really is a byproduct of this Christian worldview. For example, the left believes, in effect, that man is basically good. It's the system that's bad. And so we have to change the system, have a revolution, tear it all down, and then we'll create a new paradise. Like they tried in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany and all these different places where they were anti-Jesus and they tried to tear it all down. And it never worked because man is basically sinful. The founding fathers knew that, including Madison. All men having power ought not to be trusted, said James Madison. And this was a common sentiment among all the founding fathers. They knew that we are corrupt. Therefore, they divided and separated power. That's why to this day, the United States Constitution is the most durable governing document anywhere to be found in the world, and its only rival would be the state constitution of Massachusetts, which also was framed by with a biblical worldview, written by John Adams and then a few others.
To think that is the educational legacy of Princeton then, and then to think what is happening now and how far we have come is absolutely astounding and sobering. Jerry, when we think about public education today, so we just talked about higher education and the Judeo-Christian roots of higher education in this nation. Let's switch gears and talk about public education in America, because this has been really happening over a period of time, the state of public education in North America. This isn't something that's happened over the last 10 years.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about the roots of kind of how we got here, particularly the Humanist Manifesto and really the takeover of public education, going all the way back to the earliest 20th century.
Right. Well, this is basically, as I said earlier, self-rule under God. The left doesn't like the God part, and so there's been a systematic attacking of even the acknowledgement of God. So even the tepid prayer that was, practiced at school prayer in New York. Back in the early 1960s, they sued to remove that, and the Supreme Court agreed. And in fact, Dennis Prager says in our video, he says, I think that one Supreme Court decision probably did more to change America in a wrong way than virtually any other, particular development. And he said, in one generation, we went from teachers being blessed by their students to basically the students cursing out their teachers. Then you go another generation, and then you even have school shootings. I mean, that was unthinkable in the days when they had school prayer. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Remove all that, and you remove the idea, that there is a God to whom we're accountable.
You remove the Judeo-Christian worldview from public education. You remove prayer from public education. You remove the study of creation from public education. It's amazing people don't connect the dots.
Yes,
when
I
you
agree.
look at the state of public education today, the failure rates, the equity grading that's happening, the 1619 project, you just mentioned it, the mass school shootings that
School violence.
is school violence that's becoming commonplace right now, critical race theory being taught, gender mutilation being welcomed and embraced,
and behind the parents' back in some cases.
Yeah, the loss of parental rights. We have a secretary of the Department of Education that is on record saying that teachers know more than parents. It's amazing. But how few people connect the dots. You remove the Judeo-Christian worldview as the beginning of all wisdom. And what do you expect?
I think one of the great examples of that is, and this is not a new decision, but the Supreme Court decided in their infinite wisdom, as Dr. Kennedy would have put it, sarcastically, in a case called Stone v. Graham, they said, no, the 10 Commandments should not be allowed to be on the classroom wall.
That's another one.
They said in that decision, and this is a paraphrase, if we accept that the 10 Commandments can be on the classroom wall, then the children might read them, meditate upon them, venerate them, and obey them. And it's like, what? And then David Gibbs, the third, he's one of our guests in this video or series, and he said, I think there's probably a lot of parents who would appreciate children in the schools obeying things, things such as thou shalt not kill.
Absolutely. Well, I am just so grateful for the Providence Forum, grateful for this new project, this new feature, The Beginning of Wisdom, produced by Jerry Newcombe and the Providence Forum. What made America a center of educational excellence? I think what excites me about the Providence Forum is that we are doing our part at the Providence Forum to reclaim civics in America for the sake of the next generation.
Yes.
We need right now for the next generation and the generations that follow, for them to understand the true story of our great nation, the Judeo-Christian roots of education, the Judeo-Christian roots of America, and the Judeo-Christian worldview that was the predominant worldview of our founders and the framers of the Constitution. So grateful for your work, Jerry, and thank you so much for being on today.
And thank you for your leadership. ProvidenceForum.org for more information.
ProvidenceForum.org. And that's a wrap for the City of God today. Thank you so much for being a part of this special episode with Dr. Jerry Newcombe of the Providence Forum, one of the many ministries of Coral Ridge Ministries. We hope you will get your copy of The Beginning of Wisdom. If you were encouraged or inspired by today's episode, please pass this along to family members or friends or anyone who wants to explore today's biggest cultural issues all through the lens of God's infallible word. Thank you once again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the City of God. The City of God podcast is produced by Coral Ridge Ministries and made in partnership with the Institute for Faith and Culture. Visit us at cityofgodpodcast.com to access all of our previous episodes. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or anywhere you get podcasts. A full video version of this podcast is available on YouTube. This is the City of God podcast, where Christ meets culture.